All right, let's dive right in. We're going to break down one really powerful idea today, something that can make you way more memorable in pretty much any conversation, but especially when you're networking.
So let me ask you something. You ever walk away from a chat feeling like you said a ton, but absolutely none of it stuck? You know that feeling, right? It's super common. And honestly, it's often because we're the ones talking ourselves right out of being remembered.
Okay, so why do we do that? Well, it all boils down to this thing we could call the more is more myth. It's this deep seated belief that just dumping more information on someone adds more value. But as we're about to see, our brains, they're just not built that way. They're wired for clarity, not a fire hose of facts. And you can see the core mistake right here. We think, oh, if I just add more and more detail, I'll sound like an expert, my point will be stronger. But the reality? It's the complete opposite. In a real conversation, it's clarity that creates impact, not the sheer volume of words. This one little assumption leads to some really common habits. You know the drill, right? We explain our point, then we find ourselves explaining the explanation. We feel this pressure to justify why we think what we think, and we just can't resist adding that one last little detail. We think we're building this solid case, but what we're really doing is just building a confusing maze for the other person. And this is where it gets serious. Because when we fall into that more is more trap, the listener doesn't just get bored. Oh no. There's an actual psychological thing that kicks in, and trust me, it works against us every single time. So here's what happens first. As you keep talking and talking, the other person's brain just hits a wall. It has a limited bandwidth for new information, right? So it just stops. It stops trying to process what you're saying. They're at capacity. And this part is so crucial. They haven't just zoned out. Their brain has actively switched tasks. They're no longer engaging with your ideas at all. Instead, they're just scanning your words, hunting for the first possible pause so they can jump in. All the energy of the conversation, poof, it's gone. I mean, think about it. This quote just nails the core principle, doesn't it? Think about the last really great conversation you had. You don't remember every single word, right? Of course not. You remember the big ideas, the one or two things that really stood out and made you go, that's what you're aiming for. Yeah, that's pretty much what it all boils down to. You're basically competing for just one or two little sluts of mental real estate in that person's brain. If you bury your two brilliant points under 10 other just okay ones, you're pretty much guaranteeing they'll remember nothing at all. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the problem. If saying too much is the issue, what's the fix? Well, it's actually surprisingly simple. It's called the 30-second rule. And it's not really about just talking less, it's about creating space. The kind of space where real engagement can actually happen. But before we get to the rule itself, we've got to talk about this key idea, compression. And look, this has nothing to do with being shy or not being confident. In fact, some of the most confident people are the worst at this. The real skill here is compression. It's the art of taking your big, sprawling idea and distilling it down into a powerful, bite-sized package. And here it is, the magic number, 30. 30 seconds. That's your new time limit. That's how long you get to talk before you hit pause and let the other person back into the conversation. I know, it sounds ridiculously short, right? But trust me, its power is huge. So how do you actually do this? Okay, step 1, keep what you say under that 30-second mark. Step 2, and this one is a game changer, force yourself to stop one sentence earlier than feels natural. You know that little urge to add just one more thing? You have to fight it. Then, step 3, you actively invite them back in. Ask a question. Open the door for them. All right, that all sounds great in theory, but let's get practical. How do you actually use this in the real world? So here's a super simple action plan you can literally use in your very next conversation. Just think of it like a really simple loop you can run over and over. 1, share one single clear idea. Keep it short. 2, don't add another one on top of it. Resist. And 3, stop and ask a question. You're handing the baton back to them. That's it. That's the whole cycle. So why on earth does this work so well? It's because this little rhythm creates breathing room. It creates conversational space. And when people feel like there's space for them to talk, they feel involved. They don't feel like they're being lectured. They feel like they're part of a real back and forth. And that feeling is what makes a conversation and you unforgettable. Okay, let's wrap this up and bring it all home. The whole idea, the entire philosophy, it really just boils down to one simple, powerful mantra: less talk, more impact.
And this chart just lays it out perfectly. I mean, look at that. The difference in impact between those long, rambling explanations and the short, clear points is just massive. You're not losing a thing by being concise. In fact, you're gaining pretty much everything when it comes to being remembered.
So just remember this. Your goal isn't to show off how much you know by drowning them in details. Your real goal is to leave one clear, valuable idea behind in their mind. That's it. That's the win. And so I'm going to leave you with this one last thought to chew on. Before you go into your next conversation, stop asking yourself, what am I going to say? Instead, ask yourself a much better question. What's the one single thing I want them to walk away remembering? If you know the answer to that, you're already halfway there.